Well Rising family, welcome to another edition of The Cosmic Mother. The Cosmic Mother, episode 6, Her Religion is Ecstasy. And in this edition of The Cosmic Mother, Her Religion is Ecstasy, we are continuing on with our book review of The Great Cosmic Mother, Rediscovering the Religion of the Earth by Monica So and Barbara Moore. And in this segment today, we're going to uncover the religion of ecstasy, which is the original construct of religion under the matriarchal focus or matriarchal force of the great void or the great chaos of the womb of darkness. And so before we begin, we want to give you a question or a challenge for yourself as you listen to this particular video. When we talk about the religion of ecstasy, think about the paradox in that statement, both religion and ecstasy. How would it seem that something as in religion, a binding force, will be in tow with ecstasy, which is something that represents freedom? And also, how you may feel upon the terms of chaos and darkness, as it is originally attributed to the woman, the womb, and the feminine energy. And taking that into account in context to its original meaning, meaning nothing of an actual negative manifestation, but understanding that in the patriarchal structure that we are in today, how the terms darkness, chaos, and womb are somehow enemies to worldly progression or even personal progression, because we are to live a life of quote-unquote order. So just taking those two things into account for the listeners today, resonate with those feelings, resonate with those words, with those reviews of your own self, and see how they have come into your life in response to what will be read today, and see where the harmonious balance exists within you and where it does not, versus the truth or the essence essentially of the matter versus the knowledge that we have collected for our own selves as we live this patriarchal life in this time that we're in. So getting right into the excerpts of the book, I'll delve right in. And it says, in the world's oldest creation myths, the female god creates the world out of her own body. The Great Mother everywhere was the active and autonomous creatrix of the world, and, unlike the aloof and self-righteous patriarchal gods who only recently usurped her mountain throne, the ancient goddesses were always there, alive, immanent, within her creation. With no ontological scapegoater, she was wholly responsible for both the pain and the good of life. And so this first quote here is giving reference to many of the old in the beginning stories that existed prior to the in the beginning stories that we may be accustomed to today. One of the greater examples is in the Babylonian Genesis story of the story of Gilgamesh, in one of the most ancient quote unquote modernized cultures that we know of. It talks about Tiamat and how Tiamat was the creator of the universe, or was the primal essence of the universe that was always there, and how she represented everlasting beauty. But this same everlasting beauty was still presented in the format of, again, something called chaos. It was called chaos because it was unrelenting in its creative principles. This thing called chaos does not mean destruction or disorder in the spiritual sense. The chaos is the creative regenerative force that is unwielding and cannot be stopped. That's how creative it is. It's got so much potential in it, so much potential energy to create any and everything. It cannot be bottled up. And that's essentially this symbol for chaos, and was the essential symbol for Tiamat in the original creation story. She created these vast universes. She was a universe, or the universe in and of itself. And as Tiamat birthed different universes under these other names, those different universes whether they be male or female, birth different galaxies and birth different planets and things of that nature. They continue on birthing and expanding some of the physical forms of the universe. But in that particular story, it talks exclusively about how she created a certain set of entities that wanted to destroy her. And ultimately, in their destruction of her, they used her body to create or to be the backdrop of the universe that we're currently in. It goes right in tow with this whole, the female is responsible, or the female's body was used as the creation, and there was no scapegoat. Again, there was no scapegoat because Tiamat created the entities herself, and the entities destroyed her, and her body was taken. And so the entities, that we consider as scapegoats today, i.e. division, i.e. a devil, so to speak, some type of divine thing that we are supposed to defeat, or some divine thing that we're supposed to put all of our blame on. Those things never existed in those cultures because they understood that everything was a progressive chain of events, all originating from the exact same thing, which again was alluded here in the book. If you want to read that particular creation story, you can. It's a little complicated, so you might want to, find a commentary on it. But nevertheless, one of the oldest creation story that we know to exist talks about the Tiamat and her large-scale body of consciousness being broken down, and her large-scale body of consciousness being broken down to help create the physicality that we actually experience. So she is in and of the creation because she is it. Now that's a very vitriolic type of story if you were to read it, because it talks about these large battles and these vicious creatures and all of these different conflicts. But essentially, those conflicts are nothing more than the masculine and feminine energies, light and dark, doing their continual, their everlasting wrestling with one another that creates different manifestations of things. That potential energy coming into kinetic form. That potential and the kinetic is nothing more than the light and the dark, the chaos and the order, and then the birthing of that is the quote-unquote Christ energy, or the quote-unquote light that is in between. And so it's still the exact same narrative, it's still the exact same overarching themes, but we're looking or understanding them in regards or in terms of masculine and feminine, so that the body can better understand or make an attempt to comprehend how a galaxy, how a universe, how a planet can come into form. We could wrap our mind around things that are essentially not even necessarily larger than us, because it is all actually us at the exact same time, but understanding how it is all interconnected and interrelated on a macrocosmic level. And so this book actually provides another example from North Indian lore, which is a little more friendly to read. And it says, "At first, Kunjum Kantu, the earth, was like a human being. She had a head and arms and legs, and had an enormous fat belly. The original human beings lived on her surface. One day it occurred to Kunjum Kantu that if she ever got up and walked about, everyone would fall off and be killed. So she herself died of her own accord. Her head became the snow-covered mountains, her bones of her back became the smaller hills. Her chest was at the valley where Apanatis lived. From her neck came the north country of the Nagins. Her buttocks turned into the Assam plain. And just as the buttocks were full of fat, Assam was full of rich oil. Kanjum's eyes became the sun and the moon, and her mouth was born of Kanju Popi, where the sun and the moon shine in the sky." And so this Indian myth here just talks about a simpler version or a kinder version of the exact same thing, of this mother or this womb, or again this intergalactic chaos of darkness, it being the backdrop that allows all life to live on top of it. And so this is essentially how manifestations, or this is how realities or levels of consciousness, whatever type of terms you may have come privy to, These are how all of these things are actually experienced. If you are in some form of experience or experiential realm, you are dealing with the mother. And so we can continue on with other examples of that. In the book, more excerpts come. It says, women's mysteries were blood transformation mysteries. The experience of female body transformations magically fused with her conscious and willed transformations of matter. Matter, the mother, she transforms herself. Religious rites were combined with industry. Women's religions were organic, a unity of body and spirit, of daily life tasks and cosmic meaning. Among the women weavers of the matriarchal Navajo tribe, for example, this is still so. Women experience themselves as being directly inspired by the spider woman, the original weaver of the universe. They use no set patterns and feel no separation between the art, which is sacred, and the craft, which is secular. The woven blankets are valued as organic expressions of the special powers of the makers. Each blanket with its inspired design has a spiritual significance, and it is thought as giving power and protection to the person who wears it. And so this particular excerpt that we just read is giving an example of this chaos, or essentially this ecstasy that exists within the matriarchal understanding, or the matriarchal manifestation of things when they're done in human form. This Navajo tribe, this Navajo tribe is giving nothing more than an example of how when women tap into the innate spiritual powers of themselves, they create things that are genuinely unique, even within the confines of the blanket. Meaning they all had to use the exact same, structure, meaning it's a square, meaning they had to use square blocks and things of that nature. But they always found infinite amounts of ways to creatively make designs and expressions and impressions that were unique to their own selves. Now, this example is what these women are doing with these coats or with these blankets. That's exactly what can potentially happen with us when we tap into the darkness within our own selves. Many people suffer with the problem of, I don't know what I want to do in my life, or I have no life purpose, and things of that nature. When in fact we actually all have a purpose. We all actually have something that we can and will do with our lives. However, the answer or the unveiling or the understanding of that can only be found within the dark corners of our own mind, within the dark corners of our own emotions, the dark sections of our lives. Heck, the actual chaos and pain that we actually experience. Many of us go throughout our whole lives not processing the trauma, the quote-unquote chaos that we have experienced when we were younger, or if we had some type of traumatic life event that changed us. Many of us never seek to go back to that dark place, and because we never go back to that place and examine why that happened and why was the reason, what is the energy behind that, what is the transformation that exists within that event, as it read earlier, how females had the transformations within themselves. When we never go back to those dark places, we deny ourselves the ability to transform and then empower ourselves to walk in a renewed purpose and focus, and with a new unleashing power of that potential energy made kinetic. So many times, many of us do not find our niche. We do not find our uniqueness. We do not find how to weave the blanket of our own lives, because many of us do not tap into the mother nature that exists within all of us, so that we can get into that beautiful creative space of chaos and live that out in the order of these lights that we're in, called life. But going forward, it reads even more. In ancient textiles, a highly charged symbol language was used to communicate her story in myth. Spinning and weaving were imbued with magic powers, and inscribed spindle whorls were found in innumerable Neolithic sacrificial pits, all sacred to the goddess. The Greek armistice was seen to spin the thread of life, and the three norms of Scandinavian mythology set spinning the web of life, our destiny, our fate, as the roots of Yggdrasil, or Yggdrasil, or Yggdrasil, don't know how to pronounce it, of their cosmic world tree of the Scandinavian mythology. The subtle energy form of the human body may be seen as a subtle energy form of cosmos, relatively miniaturized, but no less vast and totally alive. The cosmos that we know is a construction, a perception or projection of energy currents in their own bodily systems. Cosmic mind and human mind are not essentially different or separate, nor are cosmic body and human body. Everything is interconnected in a vast web work of cosmic being, a universal weaving, in which each individual thing or life form is a kind of energy knot or interlock in the overall vibrating pattern. The Latin root of the word religion, or religare, which means a bond or binding back to something, as yoga, interestingly enough, means the same thing, a yoke or yoking of the individual soul to the all. The sacred emotional force which connects the part to the whole, the profane of the or the secular to that which has been broken off from or has fallen from its emotional bond to the universe, religare, our original religion, which means to bind up, in the traditional task of religion that has been to bind the pieces that have been broken away from the ecstatic existence and to bring it to its wholeness and return. So we are now tapping into the excerpts of the book when I've really branched into it myself before even reading it. Talking about the origins of the matriarchal religion, it is bringing a unison of the secular and the sacred. It is bringing a unison of, again, the chaos and the order. It is bringing a unison or a binding or bonding back in the original sense, meaning that we are putting together pieces of our consciousness, of our life together like glue. And we bond or bind these things together to create a whole person. And so that is what the original religion of ecstasy is talking about. Now, again, we could say, unfortunately, or whatever, that things have changed to where religion in its binding back process really keeps people bound intellectually, emotionally, spiritually by binding them into some form of a tradition, into some form of a thought pattern, a thought process. Whatever that, however one may, reconcile that, it still has its origins and is nothing more than a twisted or a more mundane form of the original process of putting your life together. And understanding on a cosmic level, the best way to put your life together is to understand this female, feminine, motherly, matriarchal energy. Because again, if we think about it in the sense to where many of us have understood the feminine energy in its basis form, we talk about the mother or feminine energy being the nurturer, being the giver, being the caretaker and the holder. So this same process, again, can be used to tap into our niche of life, our life process, so we can learn how to take care of ourselves through our purpose. So we could learn how to be more kind to ourselves by going back into the darkness that we have left behind and loving it, as opposed to avoiding it. These are the things that the darkness can do for us when we get into that creative, chaotic, motherly, negative energied space. And so again, I'm using those words intentionally because those are the things that we have been taught to stay away from, and those are the things we should actually run to. And so continuing on with more examples. True religion is the original umbilical cord that binds our individual selves back to our larger universal source. That source in women's religion is the Great Mother, who is the great cosmic weaver, the divine potter, the carrier of heavenly water jars, and we participate in her substance, her nature, her process, her play, and in her work. In her are both the lower regions of the tomb, which is the world of the dead, and the upper regions of the celestial sky, with whom have stars in her eyes. Now, this particular book dotted upon something that many of us who consider ourselves to be spiritual already know, that we have entered into the age of Aquarius. And just as the book said, the woman, or the matriarch, is the one who pours the water out of the jar. And so we have entered into this age of Aquarius, which is the age of feminine energy, or an age of darkness. Now again, when we understand these energetic forms, an age of darkness meaning an age of negative energy, we are not talking about negative as in bad, and negative as in destruction, and negative as in the external form of chaos. We are talking about, we have now entered into the aspect of spiritual consciousness that allows all of us to dig deep within our own psyche, and prevents and allows us to get in link with the essence of spirit by getting into the essence of our own selves. Now again, even before we entered into this age, doing this process was still profound and still magnetic and still super important. But we have essentially entered into an age to where this is what should be done first in order to assure that one lives a more fulfilling life, as opposed to the other way around. And so we are simply in a time and an age and a space to where loving oneself, taking care of oneself, nurturing oneself, being good to oneself can do many wonderful things for us, as opposed to running ourselves into the ground due to the illusion of scarcity. We should actually look within and operate from the inspired space of owning and being okay with our darkness. So going on, we continue on with the book. More examples are given. The Egyptian sky in water jar goddess Nut nourishes the earth with her milky rain. In fact, our word galaxy comes from the Greek galaxeas, meaning milky circle, or the Milky Way describes this thick white stream of stars pouring from her breast. As uterus, she is the vessel that breaks with childbirth, pouring forth water like a wellspring. All of these symbols of creative life and ecstatic participation in it. The self-representation of the goddess is a form of divine epiphany, and the parts of her body are not understood literally as physical organs, but they are understood as numinous centers of whole spheres of life. Her navel is the center of the earth, of us, from which the universe is nourished by our conscious participation as we are nourished by it. Such symbolism expresses the non-dualistic poetic mind of ancient women, whom they experience their bodies as a whole, worlds or universes, and the universes as their own body. And so again, this goes furthermore into that interconnectedness of understanding that the womb, or the mother, is the thing that gives life, or is the thing that covers us. And again, if we talk about covering, we talk about the sky. The sky covers us because it is above us. And if you look at the Egyptian inscriptions, or the Egyptian writings and pictures of the goddess Nut, just like that, just type in or Google Egyptian Nut, you will see that she covers the sky. She is a dome over the sky. And for some of the flat earth people out here, regardless if it's flat or not, the roundness that exists on the dome of the flat earth, or the roundness that is the curvature of the globe of the earth, it still represents the mother in her overarching presence. And one can understand that as, again, an overarching thing for covering, or an overarching thing for prison. And honestly, I believe it's all dependent and contingent upon how you interpret and manifest these things into your own life, and that is what will be brought before you in consciousness. So that's why there's two versions of the earth. It all depends on if you're in prison or if you're in paradise. I don't think too many of us are really ready to deal with consciousness on that level. We say we are gods, and we say we have control over ourselves, so that means we should actually have control over this illusion And many of us don't even realize that we're in a divisionary dualistic illusion, this 3D, positive, negative, and neutral. We being the neutral, many of us do not realize that being the neutral force, we get to actively choose in instantaneous moments which form of reality do we prefer to live in. Either live in the darkness or the creative darkness of the quote-unquote negative charge of the feminine, or live in the quote-unquote positive masculine light charge of the patriarch, of the masculine or the male energy. And with both of those, or either one of those ideological precepts that we use, or that we build our consciousness upon, we will come across all of the information that will confirm said belief, or said notion, or said ideology. And then we will have to come in conflict or contact with the opposite set of form of information that will undergird that version of existence. But here's the funny part about all of that. Again, we're supposed to be the neutral, meaning we take it all in and we allow all things to be true. That was a random sidebar. But still, like it says, the uterus, she is a vessel that breaks forth with childbirth, pouring forth water like a wellspring. So birth is again the mother, but the childbirth is talking about the water, again, chaos water, primal water. But this birthing is not just about the birthing of a person, the birthing of a baby, the birthing of a puppy, or the birthing of an egg. It's the birthing of other things as well. The book goes on. These are all symbols of creative life and of ecstatic participation in it. The self-representation of the goddess is a form of divine epiphany, and the parts of her body are not understood literally as physical organs, but as numinous centers of whole spheres of life. So again, when we talk about the birthing process of the womb, we're not talking about just a person or a baby or an infant. We're talking about the birthing of ideas, the spark of light that can go forth within us when we go into those dark corners of questions within our mind. Asking yourself a question, how can I do this? You have then gone into a dark space. You've entered into a space that has no light in it, that has no understanding in it, that has no knowledge in it. That is a dark, chaotic space full of potential energy. And in that potentiality, that potential space of the question you just asked, you give yourself room for the light bulb to click on, which will give you the answer for how you can manifest something that was once in darkness and bring it into the light of your own consciousness, but bring it into the light of your own personal life by creating solutions. And so this is the ecstatic life of the darkness. Because here's the funny part. If we talk about the word ecstatic and break it down, take off the E, we're left with what? Static. And if you have ever watched television and seen static on television, if you look at the colors on the static television, it's an infinite and chaotic interplay of light, of for lack of a better term, white and black, but symbolizing light and dark particles that are just chaotically bouncing all over one another, creating this static noise. But again, that same static noise that we're talking about, that I'm making reference to when you see it on the television, that is what is going on with our lives. That is what is actually going on in this great interplay of human existence. That is what is going on when we have questions that need answers. We go into a chaotic darkness, and then we either seek to pull out, or we seek to manifest, or we essentially create a friction within ourselves, a static upon ourselves, and in that static dance, we bring forth the unison of the two. And that is what ecstasy is about. The unison of this universal charge that creates all things. All right, going back to the book. It says ecstasy is the dance of the individual with the all. Ecstasis, which means standing outside of oneself, is so canceling out of the conditioned mind. All life was experienced as partaking of material spiritual wholeness that it was her. In this magic unity, ecstasy and responsibility or responsiveness were one. So when the earliest communicators with her of her essence were ecstatic women, shamans, and seers. In their trance states, they were responsible for keeping the energy channels open and flowing between each individual, the group, and the cosmic source. They healed, balanced, and translated the life forces from one energy manifestation to another. It is significant to this day within almost all of the patriarchal world religions, women's robes are still the official priestly garb and make priests function as a kind of male mother to their believers. Among the Siberian tribes, male shamans have always worn ornamental and symbolic breasts in their robes. When civilized men became the moralistic priests of the new father god, women and pagans of both sexes retain their shamanistic and ecstatic mother motif. The reality is implicit within the universe that in each of us it is at self the heart of being, that it is her way, and it is very ancient and has no time, that my God is me, and in my God I shall know her. So this excerpt covered a lot, but it's still going down the same themes, where it talks about getting outside of oneself. In order to get outside of oneself, or get into that trance state, or get into that out-of-body experience, or get into that astral projection that so many of us claim that we can do, or strive to do, if you want to get into those spaces, you need to learn to deal with the dark. Too many of us are afraid of the dark, so that's why we won't have out-of-body experiences. So many of us are afraid of the dark, that's why we still go in and out of depression like it's a grocery store. So many of us are afraid of the dark that we cannot get out of our own selves, i.e. our own ego, which is a light projection, and we continue to wrestle with life as opposed to get into the flow of life, or in essence, the flow of our cosmic being. And so the same flow again of the mother, as this excerpt kind of branched into, it just talks about the manifestations of it in those ecstatic religion ways, where it talks about the shamans and the seers and ecstatic women. The original shamans and the original seers, those were women. The original witches, those were women. Those were the people who were the caretakers over villages, because those were the people who had the ability to go deep into a trance, meaning they had the ability to break the egg of this consciousness of the mind that is stuck in the illusion of only being able to experience this 3D thing. They had the ability to go into a trance and crack the egg and delve off into the darkness to get outside of their ego body, and then go get the knowledge from the darkness that is the potential energy that has already created the event that is going to come. And so that same ability, again, as this book kind of excerpted, it's just saying that even when male religion took over, the only reason why they could even imitate authority was by imitating the mother. Many people who don't understand the great mother, they'll look at a patriarchal religion and say, well, the men wear robes, they're gay, they're closeted homosexuals, or the men wear rigs, they're closeted homosexuals. Well, whatever that might be the case, now. But the reason why they wore those things was not some homoerotic gesture. The reason why they wore those things was because they were trying to harness the greatest power that exists, which is that of the womb. And so even in embodying a dark black dress, even in embodying, a female wig, and taking the role of judge, or taking the role as priest, or taking the role of shaman, they were doing so because even they understood that even though we may be trying to make a mockery of, or we may be trying to control the feminine energy, the only way we're going to even make that possible is if we put on these clothes. Because to be able to channel, or to control the energy, you still have to be able to channel it. And so wearing those clothes are nothing more than a ceremonial aspect that helps the outer body, the ego mind, see within itself, like, I done put on this feminine stuff as a man. That means I'm trying to contact this great mother. I'm trying to get in touch with this other side. And so, one can argue the success or lack of success in that, but that is where it comes from. it all relates or all resolves or all comes back to the mother, no matter how much we try to escape it. Back to the book. Ecstasy is the only way through which the soul can lose itself in union with her. Many male mystics have also understood this. Martin Buber describes prenatal life as the original state of ecstatic consciousness within the sexual spiritual universe, a flowing toward each other, a bodily reciprocity. The mother's womb is a condensed experience of the cosmos. And essentially what he's saying it is a condensed experience of the cosmos, because a baby is always in darkness. Well, not a baby, a fetus is always in darkness. And so on a microcosmic level, when that baby is in its darkness, it does its most profound growth. It literally makes a alchemical transformation from cosmic slop of a semen, where it's literally in a different shape and form. It is not human. It is not, 10 fingers and toes, and 2 eyes, nose and a mouth, a brain, a spine. It doesn't have any of that as a sperm. It is literally a squiggly little thing, almost like a tadpole. And then, while inside of the darkness of the mother, it makes a transformation into human. These type of transformations can only be made in the darkness. And so on a smaller level, even on a life level, because again, if you're reading this, you're already been transformed into human, so you still in this bad boy. In a human level, in order to transform your life, in order to transform yourself, you got to go into that exact same space in your personal time, in your personal reflections. Going back to that mother darkness, that mother womb, that's how you get into the place of the origins of the cosmos that creates true and authentic transformation, or for lack of a better word, real change. So this is how we do it. And back to the book. It says contemporary researchers have found neurological connections between the religious trance experience and female sexuality. In women's brains, there's a unique neural link between the forebrain and cerebellum, which allows sensations of physical pleasure to be directly integrated into the neural cortex, or the high brain center. This explains why some women experience orgasms so intense they enter a religious trance or an altered state of consciousness. And here's this word again. And the ecstatic female orgasm experience, in which the physical and spiritual are fused and realized as one, is at the core of all mystical experience. So again, the book actually took a rather shift jump here. We were talking about different states of consciousness, but it jumped directly into the sexual spiritual connection of things. Again, how everything is all connected. In this new version of binding back, many of us have been religified out of sex. However, sex is, in the continuum of spirituality, the lower form, that is the direct connection to the higher form. And in the ancient understandings of life, it was understood that women carried more essence and more presence within themselves to be the spiritual conduits much greater than men were. And so as this book is now, is explaining the rediscovering, or essentially the re-explaining in our Western terms, women have mental functions or mental connections that we men do not have, that allow them to go into religious trance through sexual experience. And for the female listeners, some of y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. Y'all done had a situation that it was so deep and so good, where you literally lost yourself. You were outside of your body. I have witnessed said events as a man, witnessing it in third person, like, oh, she just left the building. Now, one of the things that we must understand here is that this is one of the major reasons why sex has been reformed in this particular way. Once patriarchy has taken over, they sought to control women, so they created different paradigms and religious structures that made it shameful for sex to be enjoyed. And the reason why it was shameful for sex to be enjoyed is because when women had sex and they enjoyed and went into those trances, they unleashed power within their own selves that made them both emotionally, intellectually, and occasionally physically stronger than men. And so, once men on a larger level got tired of essentially being owned by women, they shut down the religious freedom that women had, because they wanted to stop the spiritual power of women, which is their true essence, which is the true power that creates real change beyond the brute force of a man. And so, yes, ladies, as it has been spoken to before in, I believe, episode 2, our sexual nature has been denied. When you as a woman go through a season of religifying yourself and believing that holding back on sex is going to please some type of entity, that's literally a complete falsehood. What you need to be doing is getting in touch with the deep corners of your emotions and your psyche and in your darkness, and finding out what you have been avoiding. And one of the easier ways to do so is through the act of sex. Using sex as the conduit or a jump gate for you to actually go directly into your subconscious, directly into the root of your subconscious, while you are having an ecstatic or a physically pleasing moment. So yeah, your forebrain and your cerebellum are now fully connected, and you can consciously ask yourself, why am I mad and why am I ashamed of having sex? Why am I ashamed of XYZ? Why am I depressed XYZ? Why am I whatever? Not even just asking questions, you can tap into that space and create things through good positive affirmations and visioning. And you can do so because you can tap directly into your subconscious mind just through the act of sex, while us men have to actually learn how to tap into our subconscious mind via different forms of meditation. So this is what we're talking about in the sexual conundrum, the sexual continuum of things, that whole separation of secular and sacred, the whole aspect of the mundane and the profane and the dazzling and things of that nature. The mother energy understood that it was all one, it was all together, and that it was all potential. And the potential for us to get into all of those things for our use was in that space. And that is the space that all of us should return to if we want to have the same power that the mother has been trying to give us our whole lives. So it says, this is why in the original religion of the Great Mother, mind and body and spirit were always integrated. Because human male brains do not seem to have these neurological connections, just as human male sexuality has not evolved radically beyond the primitive sexuality, while human females, through the shift of estrus and mental cycles, have evolved a non-reproductive sexual capacity that functions primarily for affectional bonding. The researchers conclude that it is women who must take the lead in further human evolution toward the integration of the consciousness and the unconscious mind into a more profound understanding of the spiritual nature of our entire species. So this book here, this is the closing statement it has for this particular chapter review. It is actually saying on a basic scientific level that because women have brains that are connected to the other side, women should actually begin taking place or taking charge in places of power. Because again, tapping into that other side, that is the understanding of what is to come. That is the understanding of the pure potential of spirit. That is where the real things lie. And because women have the genetic predisposition to tap into those things, it is up to them to lead society out of whatever state of being that it currently is now. And it is actually a very interesting time and space that we're in, because some women are taking those positions, but because of patriarchy, a lot of women are taking said position while denigrating men in return, or a lot of women are essentially raising up in their awareness and their consciousness and realizing that this patriarchal structure that we're in is wildly deficient, but they actually don't know that this was a part of the process that was supposed to happen with the coming age of Aquarius, or the change of the age of Aquarius, and that women are supposed to actually take their rightful place as the beings that were always more advanced than us men. And so the weird conundrum that we're in right now, many women are pissed off at men because actually women have been so indoctrinated into the patriarchal way of life, they actually think that we are better and are mad at us when we're not. When in all actuality is we were never better, we just usurped control. Heck, the desire to want to usurp control is the crazy mistake that people are making, or that has been made even to begin with. Or will not even say mistake, because there is no such thing. But as far as the era in consciousness of this ecstatic dance of the back and forth of the darkness and light, when the light took over, so to speak, or it was the turn for the light to lead the charge, we were designed to go into this derogatory state of living. We were designed to descend into this division. We were designed to go into this fragmented version of reality, of understanding, of ideology, of personhood that we're in. But now we have reached a time and a space to where we can bring unison to ourselves. We can reconcile our consciousness. We can bring reconciliation to all of the people, places, and things around us. We can re-emerge out of the womb of darkness within our own selves and come out into the world as a unified, holistic person who knows who and what they are and why they are doing it. And this is the time and space that we are all in when and if we get back in turn with the ecstasy of darkness. And allow the journey, the ecstatic journey of digging deep within our own selves, dealing with the fear of our own selves, bringing that to the surface of our own being, and learning to walk in the courage of bringing that way of life, that way of purpose, that vision, that faith, that new you into the manifestation of now. And allowing ourselves to be in process between those two realities, between those two potentials, between those two spaces of consciousness, as we, as the neutral bodies of energy, be in the middle of that. If we choose to stay centered within the Christ consciousness that is the center of all of these things, that is the transcendent space of consciousness that is all of these things, we will be in a place of ecstasy. And that again is the true religion of bonding all things together. So look into your chaos and see where the order of your life exists in the midst of it. This is The Cosmic Mother, Episode 6, Her Religion is Ecstasy. We meditate. Wholeness, family, be well.